Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The UK's Prime Minister David Cameron has been filmed telling the Queen that Nigeria and Afghanistan are fantastically corrupt and possibly the two most corrupt countries in the world. Mr Cameron's apparently off-the-cuff remarks came ahead of an anti-corruption summit in London tomorrow, which the leaders of both nations are attending. Downing Street says both Muhammadu Buhari and Ashraf Ghani have admitted the challenges they're facing and were invited because of their commitment to tackling them. Our diplomatic editor, Dominic Waghorn, reports.
Buckingham Palace, the Queen's joined by MPs, the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Prime Minister. Over drinks, the conversation turns to how corrupt other countries can be.
Summit, we've got the Nigerians, we've got some leaders of some fantastically corrupt countries coming to Britain. Nigeria and Afghanistan, possibly the two most corrupt countries in the world.
This particular president is actually not corrupt. No, he's trying very hard.
Embarrassing enough to criticise one member of the Commonwealth in front of its head, the Queen. But the Prime Minister's also playing host to both Nigeria and Afghanistan's leaders at an anti-corruption summit this week. But the Prime Minister's officials say he's unrepentant, saying both Afghanistan and Nigeria's leaders have admitted they have corruption problems in essays they've written ahead of the summit. President Buhari of Nigeria has written they say that corruption became a way of life in his country under supposedly accountable democratic governments. And President Ghani called Afghanistan one of the most corrupt countries on earth. So no apology, unlike when David Cameron was caught on microphone breaching protocol, revealing the Queen's reaction to the Scottish independence vote to the Mayor of New York. He also said sorry for these unguarded comments about people in Yorkshire.
We just thought people in Yorkshire hated everyone else. We didn't realize they hate each other so much.
Why not apologise this time then? Well, maybe it wasn't quite the unintentional gaffe it seemed at first.
I think this is an example of masterly shamelessness from the Prime Minister as he seeks to move the agenda on, away from Europe and on to a subject which he wants to have some attention paid to, which is very important to him. That is corruption. So I've no doubt in my mind whatsoever that this is a completely put-up job by the Prime Minister, and every PR professional will take their hat off to him for doing it with such style.
Nigeria is 136th in the Corruption League tables according to Transparency International. Afghanistan is second to worst at 166. But that's not the point, say the Prime Minister's critics. Both countries are trying to battle the problem, and Nigerian campaigners say the UK's a safe haven for their corrupt politicians to launder their money.
We cannot think of corruption as being a developing country issue only. We see that there are a lot of people in the middle that seem to be making quite a tidy profit off corruption, and those people are certainly, hopefully, the target for big reforms come Thursday.
Either way, the Prime Minister's comments have guaranteed plenty of attention ahead of this week's summit on the issue. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
Well, David Cameron hasn't been the only public figure caught on camera being perhaps a little indiscreet. Later in the day, the Queen was hosting a garden party at Buckingham Palace and was overheard saying this about the Chinese when being introduced to a guest.
Can I present Commander Lucy Dawson, the Gold Commander when the Chinese state visited, and who was seriously undermined by the Chinese.
So I'm not sure whether you knew, but it was quite a testing time for me. I did. It was, I think, at the point that they walked out of Lancaster House and told me that the trip was off, I felt...
They were very rude to the ambassador.
They were. Well, she was, yes, Barbara, she was with me, and they walked out on both of us. It was very rude and very undiplomatic, I thought.
Yeah, this isn't the first time that Cameron's been caught, speaking privately in this way, caught on the mic. But I think it's potentially less embarrassing than you might assume, because Cameron was talking about Nigeria and Afghanistan, not specifically the leaders, but the countries. And I think it's hard to argue that they are not corrupt. The reason they're at this anti-corruption summit is because they are some of the most corrupt countries.
But if you were Nigerian or an Afghan, wouldn't you be a little bit, hang on a second?
It's the truth, though.
It's a bit strong, sir.
fair enough coming from the leader of the UK, but he is holding this anti-corruption summit here, and the leaders of these two countries have both acknowledged that there's a problem with corruption, and they've actually contributed to a book which has been published to mark this occasion. I mean, look, if you look at the Transparency International's rankings of corruption, Afghanistan ranks 166th, Nigeria is 136th, very, very very corrupt countries.
I think Becky's right. You're right on that, you see. It's the countries, not the leaders. And that's why he's got a bit of wriggle room. I imagine the diplomatic wires are hot tonight between the various capitals, making quite clear that he's just discussing the countries, not the leaders. The leaders, thank goodness they're coming.
But the official response, Rebecca, from Nigeria has been one of horror and anger.
But that's the response you would expect.
Publicly, anyway.
Publicly, yes. Yeah. But look, if you're holding an anti-corruption summit, you're going to have countries there that are corrupt. Right? You're not going to invite Denmark and Sweden and Finland and countries which have no problem at all.
Sure. I mean,
so that's why they're here. So yes, it wasn't a particularly well thought out thing for him to say, and whether he knew that he was going to be recorded or not, we don't know.
You can say that. I think what's happened over the last month and will happen until June the 23rd is every time Cameron says something stupid or interesting away from the realm of the EU, everyone accuses him of a dead cat strategy, which is the famous sort of Linton Crosby strategy. When someone's talking to you about something, if you dropped a dead cat in the middle of the table, you'd talk about the cat rather than what was being said. So I think there's a risk that everyone ultimately believes every time David Cameron talks about anything, crassly or otherwise, other than the EU, people will say it's a diversionary tactic. And the other point is exactly right, that Nigerian money, corrupt Nigerian money, is laundered very often through UK institutions. The reason why London remains a boom town is because it is a place where foreigners, corrupt foreigners, from Russians to Nigerians to people all around the world who gain their money through not necessarily fully illicit means, but not necessarily entirely respectable means either. They channel their money, they buy up property because it's an investment. They use the markets that we have here, and then they use British dependencies like the Channel Islands, like British Virgin Islands, to actively push their money away into a place where people can't get access to it. So Britain is not without sin when it comes to corruption. Britain is arguably, as all nation states are in various degrees, have its problems with corruption. Cameron is trying to do something about it, but he's also at the centre continually of an argument that Tories generally, Tory donors, people at the heart of the Tory party, will have benefited from moving their money around in a creative fashion. And so it might be a little rich for him to start talking about other people's corruption. I
was speaking to the presenter of Focus on Africa, the big evening programme the BBC puts out for African viewers on the continent, Peter Okoche, and he was telling me, Rebecca, that the Nigerians, all they need to do is point Mr. Cameron in the direction of a lot of the buildings in Kensington and say, actually, that building, that's paid for by dodgy oil money from Nigeria. Why is that money being allowed into this country? What are your safeguards for dealing with corruption?
Did he have to drag the Queen into this, though, whether he knew the microphone was so close or not?
I personally, and this is not going to be a hugely popular comment with Carol or indeed many people, this sort of sanctification of the Queen. Don't drag her into any of this nonsense. She's the Queen. She's the
head of the Commonwealth, and Nigeria's Commonwealth.
Yeah, but also she is a constitutionally political figure. She's someone who should be dragged into all these things. Otherwise, she's just an old lady in a big house. And if she's an old lady in a big house, then that's fine. But the notion that she can't be political is absurd. She talks to Cameron every Tuesday night about politics. I do wonder what she thinks of him, because he sort of talks in this. Whenever you speak to him or hear him talk about the Queen, he sort of gets this very sort of schmaltzy, oleaginous voice and talks about the Queen. He talks on purring. Oily.
I don't think she doesn't like Blair very much.
I bet she doesn't know why would you?
She doesn't like many of them. Well, no,
but he sort of gets a little bit sort of misty-eyed when he talks about it. I just wonder whether she might look at him and think, come on, love.
Well, I think she probably looks at every Prime Minister and thinks, idiot.
Yeah. she should have every right to, wouldn't she?
Oleaginous and idiot. Yeah. The term's literally something that is running off on you.
David Cameron, an oleaginous idiot. That's a pretty fair summary, I think.